Transformers. Robots in disguise. Viewers of a certain age will be flashing back to a classic cartoon right now. Others will be thinking about what Michael Bay did to the franchise or the toys they grew up with. But we can guarantee that none of you will be thinking about Transformers in the context of the Ukraine war. But you should be. They are here. Ukraine just unleashed something that has made history. It came from the sea, transformed, and then started taking out Russians. Russia's worst nightmare has arrived. A revolutionary new drone that works on land and on water. A revolution is coming. And what happened after Ukraine unleashed its Transformer shows us the brutal future that is coming for Putin's patsies. In what its military is calling a world first, Ukraine has just pulled off a combined land and sea operation that takes the traditional amphibious landing and gives it a 21st century tweak. We'll give you the basics. Ukraine sent an unmanned surface vessel loaded with a ground robot to a Russian-occupied location. When the maritime drone arrived, it unloaded the ground robot and pulled back into the water, leaving the robot to attack the Russian position. No Ukrainian soldiers were harmed in this operation. What we saw instead was an incredible melding of two different types of drones into a single strike vehicle, and Russia simply wasn't ready for it. Sounds insane, right? Almost as though it was pulled out of a movie, but it happened, and these are the details. The location was the Kinburn Spit. This little patch of land has already been in the news for a long time. Measuring just 40 kilometers long, the Kinburn Spit has been occupied by Russian troops since the initial occupation of Kherson back in March 2022. The Spit matters because of where it is located. Nestled between the Dnipro Bug estuary in the Mykolaiv region and the Black Sea, the Spit is essentially a barrier or checkpoint that whoever controls it can use to govern access to Ukraine's south coast. Russia has been doing that for years. It's set up monitoring units on the Spit to keep an eye on any maritime traffic that approaches Mykolaiv or Odessa, in addition to using the Spit to harass Ukrainian shipping routes and launch artillery strikes against targets on the banks of the Dnipro. Ukraine wants the Kinburn Spit back. For a while, in June, it looked like it was going to happen as a Ukrainian pressure campaign seemed to have forced a withdrawal of Russian troops from the Spit. But Russia still occupies, so Ukraine keeps working. With control over the Kinburn Spit, Ukraine snatches away a key surveillance platform from Russia and makes the shipping routes that its merchant ships take much safer. Ukraine's isolation strategy wasn't enough to clear the Kinburn Spit. With its new Transformer-inspired drone approach, Ukraine may have finally found what it needs to retake this vital piece of territory. That approach amounts to conducting amphibious assaults using maritime drones and killer ground robots. And conveniently, Ukraine filmed precisely what its Transformer did when it arrived at the Kinburn Spit. The minute-long video indeed shows something that we have never seen before. Drone operators from Ukraine's 123rd Separate Territorial Defense Brigade first remotely guided an unmanned maritime drone to a location on the coast of the Kinburn Spit. That's dangerous enough in its own right. Ukraine would have needed to carefully plan the route to ensure no Russian troops saw the incoming drone. Close examination of the video shows the ground drone that would soon be unleashed essentially riding the maritime drone. When the maritime drone reached the coast, it dropped a ramp and the ground robot started its part of the operation. This wasn't a rescue mission, as we so often see ground robots participate in. Ukraine's robot was ready for a fight. As the robot pulls away from the maritime drone, we see that there is a machine gun mounted on top of it, likely a PKT. Ukraine's robot moves along the coast in the direction of its target. Then it starts firing. The video doesn't show us the outcome of the skirmish, but it doesn't need to. The potential, if nothing else, is there for all to see. Ukraine can now land ground robots capable of carrying machine guns, mines, and other weapons on the coasts of locations that Russia occupies. We already know what you're thinking. This could be huge for the liberation of occupied Crimea. We agree, and we're going to explain why soon, but first, we have a few more things to explore about the Kinburn Spit operation. Ukraine has called this a world first, and that can't be argued. We've just seen an amphibious landing pulled off by what amounts to a hybrid between maritime and ground drones. Just saying this is enough to blow minds and trigger nightmares for Russian soldiers who have already more than had their fill of Ukraine's metal marvels. Business Insider calls this a significant development in the use of uncrewed systems in the war. Again, we can't argue with that assessment. We'd even go so far as to say this changes everything about the naval aspect of the war. Neither maritime drones nor ground robots are anything new. Ukraine has been using the latter for operations including evacuations, logistics, and even combat missions for months. Maritime drones have been in play for even longer. The Black Sea Fleet can tell you all about them. Well, the ships that survived. Plenty of Russia's warships have felt what maritime drones can do, and they're now sunk or stricken to the point of being unusable. But what we're seeing now is a merging of two technologies that have already been causing serious problems for Russia. That is the game changer here. But outside of the footage that Ukraine has shared, we have to speculate when it comes to what types of drones Ukraine used. At the time of creating this video, the maritime drone used in the operation is unidentified. However, the ground robot is believed to be from the Rise family of robots that have been making their presence known in Ukraine for much of 2026. In fact, we may be seeing some battlefield ingenuity at play here that not even Ukraine's defense ministry would have expected. It was only in April that the ministry made the Rise and Rise Pro available for units to acquire via the Brave One marketplace, where units can trade E-points that they earn for completing operations using drones for more drones. Perhaps the 123rd Separate Territorial Defense Brigade took the opportunity to buy the Rise because it had a big idea for the Kinburn Spit. We now know what the idea was, that the Rise had established itself before it reached the Brave One marketplace. In Dobropelia, members of Ukraine's 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade had already used a Rise as part of a counter-offensive that saw the robot loaded with a machine gun that it used to clear occupied houses of Russian soldiers. Metza says that this single Rise robot played a key role in liberating the villages of Vasela and Gruzka a few months ago, and that one has also been recorded rolling down a road near Vasela, firing on Russian positions as a message to surrender was blared out to the Russian soldiers via a loudspeaker equipped on the robot. That is terrifying. Imagine seeing a robot driving toward you, a machine gun pointed at your hidey hole, telling you that it's time to surrender or an unkillable hunk of metal will fire. The Rise has also been used for what you'd expect it to be used for. The robot, which was actually unveiled back in 2024 and has a range of up to 20 kilometers along with a payload capacity of 300 kilograms, was involved in a rescue mission back in February. This time, a Rise Pro saved a wounded soldier from Ukraine's 112th Territorial Defense Brigade by driving to the shelter where the soldier was hiding, surviving FPV drone and artillery attacks during the journey, and then extracting that soldier to a safe position. The point we're making here is that enough is known about the Rise and its capabilities to safely assume that the robot used in Ukraine's TRASFORMER strategy is a Rise. It looks the same, it can carry a machine gun just as we've seen a Rise do in the past, and it's also available on the Brave One marketplace. All of the pieces fit. However, it's the potential here that's really important. What we've seen in Ukraine's video is a single operation carried out by a pair of drones that have just combined to make military history. A blueprint has been established. Now imagine this, an army of these transformers all ready to launch amphibious assaults. You already know that we're talking about what could be in store for Crimea here. This new drone approach could change everything about Ukraine's strategy for the occupied peninsula. But before we dig deeper, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. We dig behind the headlines to give you the full story and in-depth analysis. If you like what you see, remember to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. So, Crimea. Ukraine isn't supposed to be able to conduct an amphibious assault on the peninsula. Granted, Russia has been acting like something like that could be coming recently. As Ukraine continues its strategy of isolating Crimea via strikes against fuel and supply trucks on land and ships on the Black Sea and Sea of Azov, in addition to logistical nodes in Crimea and the occupied territories, Russia's military planners have gotten worried. As RBC Ukraine reported on July 3rd, Russian units in Crimea have been conducting special staff exercises as preparation for repelling an amphibious assault, as well as building up coastal defenses. However, such an assault in the traditional sense seems unlikely. For one thing, Ukraine barely has a navy, and certainly doesn't have enough landing ships to send a large enough contingent of troops into Crimea to retake the peninsula by force. Even if ships weren't a problem, Ukraine would have to dedicate tens of thousands, if not 100,000 or more soldiers to liberating Crimea, assuming it followed the type of amphibious approach that Russia is preparing to repel. Even with drones and artillery, Ukraine would have a tough time breaching occupied Crimea's defenses while holding off the invading forces on the mainland. Stretching too thin would be a problem. But now an alternative scenario is emerging. Imagine this. After seeing what the 123rd Separate Territorial Defense Brigade just achieved on the Kinburn Spit, Ukraine's military planners get an idea. They already have maritime drones, and there are RICE ground robots being built every day. Maybe a traditional amphibious assault isn't needed. Instead, Ukraine could do what it's been doing for most of the war, which is upending all expectations to launch a liberation campaign in Crimea that nobody expects. Building up a robot army filled with the Transformer-type drones that were used on the Kinburn Spit, Ukraine could send dozens, if not hundreds of ground robots to the Crimean coastline. Those robots won't retake Crimea alone, of course. They have limited ranges and can only be sent with so much firepower. But what they could do is wreck the coastal defenses that Russia is erecting in Crimea, either with machine guns or by launching kamikaze attacks using mines or other explosives. The idea here wouldn't be to completely clear the Crimean coastline. That would require thousands of transformers. Instead, Ukraine could use this approach to clear out portions of the coast, allowing it to inject special forces teams into Crimea, where those teams could conduct operations to take out troop positions, air defenses, and other key targets. It wouldn't be a full-blown invasion of occupied Crimea, but it would be an approach that turns the peninsula into a danger zone at a time when Ukraine is already isolating Crimea through its logistics lockdown program, part of a broader strategy, if you will. That isolation strategy has already caused fuel shortages to run rampant in Crimea, in addition to seeing Ukraine take aim at power substations, leading to repeated blackouts on the peninsula. Crimea's occupiers are already scared. What was meant to be a luxury location for Russians has become a war zone. Ukraine knows it. It's even holding back from striking the Kerch Bridge, not because the bridge can't be hit, but because Ukraine wants to make the Crimean occupiers run back to Russia as a symbol of Putin's abject failure to protect them. As the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Brovdy, so eloquently puts it, "We are not touching the Crimean bridge if you haven't noticed. Let the f***ing through it. Let all those millions keep f***ing pouring across that little bridge, for f***'s sake. Non-stop back to their Russia." If Ukraine adds amphibious assaults conducted by maritime drones and killer robots into this already combustible mix, we'll see the exodus. Russia will have to deal with hundreds of thousands of refugees running for their lives, especially once the Crimean occupiers learn that the robots are being followed by Ukrainian soldiers who are already making their lives hell from afar. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves with this scenario, but there is potential in what we've just seen Ukraine do. A world first could have just set the stage for the liberation of Crimea. Still, let's take Crimea out of the equation for a moment. Even then, there is still a huge amount of potential in what Ukraine has just done with its Transformers approach. Think about where it happened. The Kinburn Spit sits at the mouth of a vital estuary that is still being contested, and that's a situation that is happening all over Ukraine. In many regions of the front, Russia and Ukraine are separated by rivers that Russia needs to cross to conduct its assaults. Both sides will fire artillery and send drones to attack the other, but Ukraine's combination of maritime drone and ground robot opens up possibilities for Ukraine to attack Russian positions on the banks of contested rivers. That would be a major problem for Russia. River crossings have already proven difficult enough for Russia, as these natural barriers are easy to defend due to crossing points being so few and far between that Ukraine can train drones and artillery on any location where Russia attempts to cross. Natural crossings are also typically close to roads that Ukraine knows better than Russia, so choke points are easy to create, and approach routes can be predicted. As Forbes points out, Russia has often been forced to create Frankenstein pontoons just to attempt river crossings, which is a dangerous task that leaves Putin's troops exposed both during construction and when a crossing is attempted. Now add Ukraine's new Transformers into the mix. As those attempting to construct or cross bridges are pelted, Ukraine could also start sending ground robots across the rivers to attack Russian positions. A combination of offense and defense would make river crossings that are already challenging practically impossible. Who knows? Ukraine might even be able to open up opportunities to conduct crossings of its own by using ground robots to push Russian forces back far enough to enable Ukraine's troops to reach the occupied banks. Again, it's another potential scenario that arises out of Ukraine's brilliant new strategy. Scaling back from the speculation for a moment, the other thing that Ukraine's exploits at the Kinburn Spit show us is that the rise of ground robots continues, and it's moving in directions that nobody anticipated. Ukraine's use of these robots has increased dramatically in 2026. According to Business Insider, robot usage has increased by 122% during the first half of the year, with June seeing Ukraine carrying out a record-breaking total of more than 16,500 ground robot missions alone. Most wouldn't have been as creative as the Kinburn Spit incident, but that doesn't matter. Ukraine wants its robots to carry out 100% of supply missions in the future, the outlet says. But now we're starting to see the attacking potential in these robots. The Kinburn Spit showcased that potential. So did the ground robots used in the 2 villages we mentioned earlier. And back in June, United 24 media reported that Ukraine was even able to clear out the entire village of Novoplatonivka with a ground robot. So there may be potential for them to capture Russian positions in Crimea and elsewhere after all. These robots are here to stay. Only now we're seeing sea drones become land killers, all due to the versatility of Ukraine's ground robots. We have one more point to make: ingenuity. It lies at the heart of Ukraine's entire defense against Russia's invasion, and the transformer at the Kinburn Spit is the perfect example of Ukraine's soldiers coming up with ideas that simply wouldn't occur anywhere else. We've seen that ingenuity in Ukraine's drones, which can now strike thousands of kilometers deep into Russia. Ukraine has been able to build its own cruise missiles, and it constantly comes up with tactics and strategies that overcome Russia's manpower and material advantages. It is this ingenuity that has turned Ukraine from being little more than a recipient of aid in the grand scheme of European military architecture to a valued security partner throughout all of Europe. Ukraine is an innovator. It has shown a remarkable propensity for adapting civilian technologies into lethal killing machines, and what happened at the Kinburn Spit is just another example. Transformers are now in Ukraine, and the blueprint has been created for their use. We can only wait and wonder what brilliant idea Ukraine's soldiers will come up with next, as they show Russia that winning a war is about more than the sheer volume of meat and metal that you bring to the table. It's about ideas, intelligence, and ingenuity. Ukraine never stops coming up with new ways to stop Russia, and it's just taken one step closer to creating a version of war that will be fought entirely by machines. That's something that military theorists have said is coming for a long time, though it was never clear until now how it would happen. Ukraine is now the frontrunner in robot warfare. The future has arrived on the battlefield, and Ukraine's robot army lies at the heart of it all. Find out why that future is happening now and how Ukraine has developed robots and scaled up so fast by watching our video. And if this video gave you some insight into what makes Ukraine's military tick, we have a lot more in store. Subscribe to The Military Show and keep an eye out for what we have coming next on the channel. And thank you, as always, for watching.